How do you create a successful and effective business plan for your salon that proves to be successful and help you drive success in your salon? Hey, I'm Kayla, and I am your host of the Profitable Salon Owner podcast. And on with me once again is the Jason Everett. Hello, Jason. Thanks
I
for hanging
like
out
that I
with
got
me.
I like that I got the Jason Everett. That's very fancy. If you look me up on Facebook, I'm Mr. Jason Everett. That's my
Ooh,
fanciness
nice.
there. But it's because
Nice.
somebody took the dang Jason Everett before I thought Facebook was cool. So what are you gonna do?
So Jason Everett is already taken before, so you had to be
There's
Mr.
another
Jason
Jason
Everett.
Everett. He runs like an insurance firm. Not as cool.
Wow.
I know, it's kind of
Fascinating.
boring. He and I are friends. We're friends. We know each
Are
other.
you
Because
no kidding? Like you've met
I
in
want to
person?
take no. I just want to take
Oh.
his account. So I'm being homies.
You're like,
Anyway,
hey, if you ever retire from being Jason Everett, I'll take it, man. After you've
yeah.
built 16 years of Mr. Jason Everett.
Yeah, business plan idea number one: get all of your URLs, your social media URLs, and your
Get it now, no
get it
matter
now.
where you're at in your business.
Yeah,
Just claim them. I know. I have a couple that I've already purchased because one day I know that I'll use them.
there
So
you
yeah,
go.
see, I've learned.
Let's do it. Well, let's dive into this.
Nice.
I
Yeah.
love talk business plans. I have a love-hate relationship with business plans. But I think for a lot of people, I'll give some clarity around them because there's kind of like the Harvard MBA answer to business
Nice.
plans, and
Ooh,
there's like the what works for real plan. I'd like to give the what works for real plan, and it
nice.
might not work for you. That's totally okay. But I can tell you what's worked for me, what's worked for hundreds of other salons, and hopefully get you in a good place.
I mean, you've owned a business or two, so might have a couple
A
ideas.
business or 14, but yes, I've
Yeah.
owned a few, and some have had great business plans and failed. Some had no business plans and succeeded. So I think you got
Nice.
to roll with like what does it really take to become successful?
Yeah, for sure. I love how your example was Harvard and NBA. Like those are very, very opposite sides of the spectrum. But yes, let's talk about what's for real. So before we get started on like building the plan, your business plan, what are you looking for? Like, what is the purpose of having a plan in business rather than
Yeah,
just like, hey, let's start one and let's go? Like, how
yeah.
prepared do you actually need to be?
I mean, look, I like I said, I've owned whatever, it's 10, 14, something like that, businesses, a bunch of different businesses. And it's really interesting. I've started businesses with giant plans, like I said, and I was like, I had huge, massive plans of how we're gonna take over the world. I had huge pitch decks and all these things, and those things have crashed and burned. And I've also started a business with absolutely no plan, and they just kind of evolved. And I would say that there's not a right or wrong. You just got to find out what type of person you are as an owner and be
Ooh,
able to go forward. And I would say the best thing you could do though, in like this company, like when I started this company 15 years ago, I'd say this is my greatest successful company. I'll put it that way. And actually 16 years is good. I'm rolling on 16
November,
years.
huh?
I'm old. That's all I'm saying. But yeah, 16 years is that, one of the things that like this business and this company did start with something very simple that I had to put together, which was called a pro forma. And if you don't know what a pro forma is, I mean, I don't know if
I
you've heard
don't.
me mention that before, Kayla, but like a pro forma is basically a projection forward of success. And it's ironic. I'm filling out this paperwork. They want me to fill out for bank. We're working on getting another building and all this stuff. And the bank's like, hey, can you give me a projection of your next 2 years of they call it forecasted sales? Basically, like, who's going to buy things from you? What are you going to do? How much more money are you going to make? And of course, the bank wants to know that it's going up and up and up and up. That's the only thing they care about, but like, they want to know, have you thought about it and have you projected forward your future? So what a pro forma does is you can project forward a 3-month future, a 6-month future, a 12-month future, a 10-year future. Like there's a lot of things you can do. But I feel like when you sit and you plan a business, one of the most difficult things is like when you don't know what you're even planning for, like how do you plan out the future? Like, I don't know. And so what I would say is that exercise in and of itself is the business plan. And now
Hmm.
don't get me wrong. There's people who are like, well, you got to do a SWOT analysis, a strength, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. You got to do a 1 year, a 5 year, a vision statement, a core mission statement, like all these things. And that can be part of a really clean business plan. But I think some of the best things I've seen is like a 1-page business plan that talks about where you're going and what you want to do. And then a very solid 1, and maybe if you're lucky, a 5-year pro forma. And that pro forma, it can just literally be an Excel spreadsheet. What do I think I'm gonna do this month? What am I doing next month? How do I go 12 months forward? And you start plugging in numbers to your spreadsheet and you like let it auto populate some level of that. Is to say, well, if I bring in this many guests, like for example, as a salon owner, you might say, well, I'm going to start out with me, and then on month 3, I'm going to bring in another stylist, and on month 6, I'm going to bring in another stylist, and on month 7, or you're like, I can bring in 5 stylists on month 3. Like you got to say, how aggressive are you trying to be?
Hmm.
What are you trying to accomplish? Because what it'll start to do is it'll make your brain start to reorder you're like, well, maybe I should bring in 3 stylists on month one because that doesn't get me to the level of income that I need to get. And so like it when you start to map out that pro forma and you like project forward what you're going to be doing, all of a sudden your brain starts to solve all the problems in advance that you're about to walk into. Because let's be
Mm.
honest, business ownership is about solving problems for clients and customers and solving your own problems well enough before you implode. Like
It's a
that's it.
problem solver.
Every day is your job is to solve problems for yourself, for other companies, for whatever, because again, even as a salon owner, right? Like you're there to solve people's hair problems and their growth problems and their, image problems and all those other things you're trying to solve. But you've got to solve your people problems and your finance problems and your profit problems and your management like you're constantly just a giant problem solver, right? So, the more you can think about what problems you're going to need to solve in advance, your brain actually switches into this gear that says, "Oh, I can do this, and I can do that, and I can do this, and I can do that." And all of a sudden, you start to put all these solutions in place, and then all of the planning starts to happen from your projection of problems in the future, right?
Mm.
Is all of a sudden your plan starts to back out. So sometimes what you can do is say, well, what the best thing to do is say like, well, what's the end? Like, what's my end goal? Like, what do I want to do? Do I want to build a salon that one day I can sell to somebody in the future? Like, is that part of it? Um, do I want to build a salon that I'll just retire from and like just give to somebody? Do I want to sell out to somebody else? Do I want to sell to other staff members that work for me that are part of that deal? Like you got to get clear about what you do. So they always say like begin with the end in mind. Like how am I going to get
Mm.
out of this thing in the future? I think a lot of salon owners get in a spot where they're like, I just want to run a place that's better to work at than that last place that I worked at. Ta-da, business plan. And I know I can work really hard, so I'll go do it. And they don't start with any sort of pro forma or any sort of plan. They just start to kind of like,
Make it up as they go.
they find a pretty, like just being really candid, they find a pretty location and they're like, oh, it'd look gorgeous if I got that spot there. And I've got a couple of friends with me. Ta-da, a business plan. So not to
Yay.
insult you, but like if you've seen that happen, type in the chat somewhere and say, I've seen that because I think so many people just get stuck in that, like I found a pretty spot. And I just
Yeah.
know when I'm talking to salon owners, what level of salon owner they are when all they can tell me is they have a name and they have a place they've been dreaming of. That's what that's most people's plan is a name and a place. And that's not really a plan. So I
Yeah.
think a short version of a one-page business plan, like what's your mission statement? What are you about? Who are you going to target? And then where do you plan on being in 1 year? Where do you plan on being in 5 years? And what's your goal? And like, if you can have that, one-page business plan, it gives you some really unique perspective on where your planet, where your planet, I don't know why I said that, where you're planning to go, what you want to do, and like what can be really framed up for you well.
Nice. Love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense of like, yeah, thinking more ahead too. Like, but obviously everything's going to change, but even having a vision of something you're pursuing keeps you kind of on track. Be like, well, this is what I want to end up being. So does this fit into that plan? What kind of like resources when you start to think about building it, like who did you turn to and who do you turn to know if you're doing it right? Or if you're knowing if like, do you, ask your mom? Do you, do you hire
Well,
people? Like
it
what?
depends. I'll be really honest. You kind of joked about, do you ask your mom? Like my mom ran a business for, 30 years. So yeah, I did
Wow.
ask my mom. Like I don't know if I ran this plan by her. I'm trying to think when I get back to it. I don't know if I put this plan in front of her, but like as I've run multiple businesses, I did ask my mom. I'm a fourth generation entrepreneur business owner.
That's
So
right.
I went to my mom and I said, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? I went to my grandfather, who's her dad, and said, hey, what do you think? And he gave me a lot of advice on it. And so like I did run it by my family because they had experience in it.
Yeah.
I also knew other people who'd owned other businesses and I ran it by them. And this is a really interesting thing is that some of them gave me really bad advice, not my family. Well, no, sometimes family too, but like some experts gave me really bad advice. One of my very first CPAs gave me some really bad advice and he said don't start a corporation right out the gate, just do it under your own name and then like just do it that way. And that was actually really bad advice because if I would have done that, it would have really cost me a lot of time and effort if I would have done it that way. And that was like at the time it was my CPA, but I asked him
Mhm.
because he was doing I was a commission sales rep and he was my CPA for that. He was giving me very poor business advice for starting a large business, but he was trying to protect me and save me $1 because he was, that wasn't the level of CPA that he was. I needed advice from a bigger level of CPA.
Yeah.
The other thing about this company is I actually started this business as a franchise initially, as a sales training and coaching company as a franchise. And so that franchise gave me a level of a business model when I started. Now we're not anywhere near that same type of business now. It's a totally different business model and it's evolved over the last 16 years, right? But when I started this company, quote unquote, that's still kind of under the same framework, like it's had its evolutions and it's gone forward. And like I've had to modify like the business model and the business plan has been modified probably 3 major times in the last 16 years of like, I'm definitely going in this direction. Then we definitely went in this direction. Then we definitely went in this direction. And that's continued to evolve. And like, it's still the same core business. It's just like that whole thing that I said of like, well, who are we targeting and what are we selling to them? That's continued to change because as the High Performance Salon Academy, that entity by itself has not been around for 16 years. High Performance Salon.
Yeah.
High Performance Salon has been around 8 years of that business entity, but I've always been doing training, coaching, consulting. I've just served different type of audiences. And when we realize like the audience we really serve best is the salon spa industry, that's when everything really changed for us. And so I think that's kind of the evolution of that is like, you might say, well, I thought as a salon, we were going to handle this type of clientele, but really it gets modified. That's a micro business change to your plan. You're still doing the same thing, just with a slightly different target.
Yeah. So like what I was hearing you say is like when you're thinking of people who to ask advice from, you want to find the people who have had success in what you're aiming to achieve.
Yeah, so I don't so this is really tricky. I have a very big filter on who I accept advice from. I only accept advice for people who are successful in that area I would like advice on. So
Mm.
meaning, if I'm going to take relationship advice, a lot of people would argue, well, you want to talk to somebody who's been divorced 3 times to get their lessons. And I'm like, I don't want those people. I want advice from the people that have been in successful marriages for 30
Yeah.
years. And people were like, well, don't you want to know? And I'm like, actually, I don't, because what's going to happen is they're going to tell me like what their screw ups were for sure. And like maybe to prevent them, but I want to know like what prevented those screw ups in the first place.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important thing. And like I said, my parents ran businesses and I love my parents to death. I know they don't watch a podcast, so I can talk about them. But what I would just say is both my parents, my mom and my dad, ran companies that were very dependent on them for their success and operation. And
Mm.
so like I just know, even though like asking them for advice, they ran a very specific type of business that if they
Yeah.
didn't work in it every single day, that like they wouldn't exist. Like my dad was a contractor, and my dad passed away a couple of years ago, but he was a contractor and he basically was the operator every single day. So if he didn't work, he didn't get paid. And what happened is at 60 years old, he ended up falling off his tractor, hurting himself, and couldn't work anymore. Ended up
Ooh.
losing the business, lost his house, lost everything because his business was just him. And so salon owners get stuck in that same mode. Not that they would fall off a tractor, but like they might break their wrist or they have carpal tunnel or they have some issue. And all of a sudden, this business that they built on their own back is now no longer viable for them because they were like, I just am indestructible and I can just go forever. And like one day somebody will buy this. And I'm like, well, but your clients aren't really for sale. That's what's really
Yeah.
interesting. Like if you have a salon and a company and people, that would be for sale. But if you're just renting a chair somewhere and one day you hope your clients will go to somebody else and somehow you'll sell that, that's really dangerous because every one of those clients is a sovereign individual that can just go, I'm going to just go find another stylist. Like that's kind of dangerous. So you want to say, how do I really run a business? And that's what I wanted to do as a business, was create a repeatable, replicatable, scalable company that would be available to be sold one day, that heaven forbid, I'm not even running my own podcast.
That's right. I am.
Yeah, but Kayla, you got this. And that's the whole point, right? Is like, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow or a turnip truck, or I don't know where there's turnip trucks, but you know what I'm saying? It's
Like
like,
turn up the vegetable.
yeah, it's like this would still exist. You could still have
Yeah.
somebody on the podcast. Like this would still happen. And so that's what I'm saying for me is like the question becomes, we are a big fan in the academy of running businesses that are not solely dependent on the owner. And a lot of people are
Yeah.
like, why don't you work with independents? I'm like, well, I work with independents in a way that helps them grow into businesses. That's what we do. But I just don't coach them to stay there because that's not repeatable. That's owning a job, not
Right.
owning a business. And we're all about here is like helping you create a business that you can actually, not that you have to sell it, but that it's an asset instead of something that you could have taken away very easily.
For sure, for sure. So I wanted to ask too, like I know a lot of people are established business owners and they are like, well, the business is on my shoulders. So what advice would you give to people to be like, how do they get out from behind the chair? How do they start to focus more on their business?
Yeah, well, I think it is a challenge, right? Because what makes you successful in the beginning is that hustle culture of like working your face off behind the chair. And so many people get stuck in that mode of like, that's what made me successful. So why would I give that up? And also, it's one
Yeah.
of the most emotionally rewarding positions inside the entire salon,
Mhm.
right? So it's like you get so much benefit out of working with your guests and you feel like they love on you and you pour into them. And like, that's why you do this in the first place. So the
Yeah.
second I say, okay, I'm going to take you down from 5 days a week, let's just go to 4 days a week, people are like, what? Because like, in their first maybe $250,000 in revenue that they that they generate as a salon, they're trying to figure out like, okay, they have to work really, really hard.
Yeah.
But then as you go from that leap, and it's all different, right? That first 250, then to your 500, then from your 500 to a million, each of those different levels requires a different thing, which is why inside our academy, we built this thing called a roadmap that actually shows you, well, okay, what do you need? What's the strategy for the first $250,000 a year? What's the strategy for the next $500,000 a year? What's the strategy for the next $1 million a year? And the question really becomes like, how do you then evolve as a business owner to know what strategy to use at what time? Because the strategy that got you to 250 won't get you to 500. The strategy to get you to 500 won't get you to a million, which is why you need to get some outside advice and some counsel on like what part of your business plan, if you will, needs to be modified. And I think one of the biggest challenges becomes, all right, how do we know what to do when that 5 days a week becomes 4 days a week?
Mhm.
Because what happens is you have to focus on business growth of not just yourself now, but you have to focus on how do you grow those other people? Because let's say you're going to lose that $1,000 a month in revenue, but you need to replace it with the other three people that are on your staff or the four people that are on your staff. But the good news is, if you have three people on your staff and you're replacing $1,000, they each have to do $333 a month, which is like $70 a week. Like it's not that big of a deal. But in that 1 day free that you now have, now you get to work on marketing to grow the staff that is on your current team and then coaching them to help them grow and develop. And the goal would be that by you losing that $1,000, I'm making an arbitrary number, but let's say by you losing that $1,000, you find a way to make another $3,000 to $5,000 by you giving up that $1,000. And
Mhm.
1 day a week might be more than that, but I'm just giving you an example, right?
Yeah, for
Is that
sure.
the idea is you've got to learn that there's more, that the three other people that work for you or the two other people that work for you, if you coach them properly, they should begin to outperform you because of how you're coaching them. And that's the weirdest thing to apply to your psyche when you're trying to feel like you're the coolest kid on the block and like you're very successful and you define your
Yeah.
success by how happy your guests are. It just creates a challenge. So I think
Well, it's
that's a
like
big deal.
it's hard to let go. Like put blood, sweat, and tears into building your business, and it's hard to
Yeah,
let go and evolve and change when you like, well, I built this, I got to stay here and keep building it because if I don't build it, then it's going to fall apart. So I think that like
100%.
we talk a lot about little voices, and your little voice gets in your head, and like you start to hold yourself back. So quiet the voice. It's not
Yep.
always the right answer. We're going to take a commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about how to look at your salon and see where it's successful and see where you need to pivot. What are vital parts of your salon business that shows where your business plan is maybe going awry? So hang with us. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to increase your retention and revenue and convert website traffic to clients? Then you're ready for Maya. Maya creates better business relationships by pairing the right clients with the right beauty professionals. Use promo code HPSA for your first 2 months free. Visit joinmaya.com to get started.
We're Phorest, born on the salon floor and built for and by hair and beauty professionals like you. Phorest is your marketing, your reporting, your reputation management. You need one easy-to-use system that does it all. Phorest, together we grow.
Sustain Beauty Co. has two of the best tools to help you save water, time, and a bunch of money. Join the clean water salon movement with EcoHead's water-saving shampoo nozzles and scrummy plant-based microfiber towels. Available at sustainbeauty.co.
Are you tired of not knowing what your hair color is costing you? With Salon Scale, we take the guesswork out for you, so you can cover your back bar expenses, reduce your color waste, and generate more profit in your salon. Click the link in the description to get 10% off your first year.
Welcome back to the Profitable Salon Owner Podcast. I'm hanging out with Jason Everett. We are talking about business plans for your salon and how to get out behind the chair and how to look at your business and see where it's successful. So Jason, I'd love to know like when people are looking at their business and like, yeah, I have this business plan, I had this vision of something I wanted. How do you start to see if like your business plan needs to change because something's going wrong?
Yeah, well, I mean, the easiest way to know if something's going wrong in your business is you're either stalled or you're going backwards. I mean,
Ooh.
it's pretty rare that like your business plan's going wrong when you're making more money, unless, and there is an unless to that, unless you're making more money gross revenue, like you have more people, more stuff, more things, but you're broke. I just had a friend of mine I was talking to the other day. He's like, he was running his insurance firm, and he said, man, we're doing $16 million a year, but like I can't make my car payment. And I'm like, well, that's probably a problem. Like you have that much volume, but like you're not keeping it. And I said this to somebody the other day. I said, what's really interesting is the more revenue and the more money you make, the harder it is to hang on to it. Like that's a weird thing to say, but sometimes with business owners, you get to a place where you're like, wow, look at all this revenue. And you get caught up in like how much money you're doing. But then you're like, why am I dealing with like 10 staff and all these other things? But like at the end of the day, like I'm still not able to like, I'm still worried about groceries, or I'm still worried about this. Like, it's just a very awkward thing. And so, we are a big believer of a lot of, we have a profit simple model that we teach and some other things that are very key to making sure that people go, okay, I get it. I want to create some better opportunities. And like, how do I make sure that profit goes in my pocket every single month? I'm making the money that I deserve. And I start to get in a place where I can have the free time that I want. And I'm actually building a lifestyle, because I truly believe if your business does not allow you to have the lifestyle that you want, you are a servant of the business instead of the business being a servant of you. And like the business, it should be a two-way street. Like I have a relationship with this business that I run every single day, is that I give to it, it gives to me, and it's a two-way street. But if I give to the business and it doesn't give anything to me back, well, now I'm out of exchange. I need to fix that problem. And like, if the business only gives the employees, like you guys are happy as team, but I'm not being taken care of, like that's not going to work either. So it has to give to the team, it has to give to the business, and it has to give to the business owner, and the business owner has to give to it. And I think that's kind of one way to do it. So you asked, how does it go awry? It's not usually with way more money and you don't know how to solve it, but that can be one way. The other one is you're static, or you're stale, or you've stalled out. Like we call that a plateau, right? You've hit a plateau and you've been stuck at $700,000 for the last 3 years. What that generally means when you're at a plateau is you've reached your level of competent operation of the business. That is your own personal limit for how far you can go with the amount of information that you currently have. Like you've been given a business model, you've been given some coaching, you've been given all that. And even though you read some books and you whatever, but you're stalled out, it's because something in your model either means there's something you're not willing to confront, there's a person on your team that you're unwilling to deal with, or you need to learn something about the business model that's preventing you from growing at the level that you need to. Right? I was trying to find this post I shared the other day. I don't know if I have it right here in front of me, but somebody shared a post that I shared the other day. They reshared my share. You know how that goes, right?
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, it was cool. And here, I think I found it. But what it said, the magic you're looking for is in the work you are avoiding.
Whoa.
I know, right? I did not say that quote. It was a quote I found, and I said this blew my mind. Then somebody else shared the quote as I shared it. But it said, the magic you are looking for is in the work you're avoiding. So if you're stalled out and you're at a plateau, there's some work that you're avoiding. Maybe it's work in finances. Maybe it's work in marketing. Maybe it's work in hiring. Maybe it's work in like getting out from behind the chair. Like if you're avoiding getting out from behind the chair, that might be stalling you out. If you're avoiding understanding your taxes better, that might be what's preventing you from doing it. So those are obvious. So like, the first one I mentioned was a lot of money too quickly and you're not making any. The second is you're stalled out and you're plateaued. The third one, which most people know about because it's very obvious, is like you ain't making any money, or you have a rapid decline, or you have a walkout, or you have a problem. And like it's an opportunity for you to look at it, and you either choose to make that downturn, you either choose to fix it, level it out, and call it the Valley of Insight, where you look at yourself and go, all right, I messed up. What do I deserve to look at here? And it's a Valley of Insight. And if you learn the lessons from it, then you can come out the other side. If you choose to stay in that valley forever, you're just going to either plateau low or you're going to eventually go out of business. And it's always interesting. I mean, I've had lots of valleys of insight in this company where like, if you look at it now, it's a hilarious blip. Like you look at it, it's like up, 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 up. And then it feels like a giant crash. But then the up on the other side, you look back and that blip is like nothing. You're like, oh, that was a cute little learning lesson that you had there, Jason. Cute, right? Like it's one of those things that you're like, oh, that's pretty funny. But like in retrospect, it was a huge day. It was a huge problem. It was such a big thing. And I had no idea that there was so much large success on the other side of that Valley of Insight.
Yeah.
And I think no matter what you do, getting outside advice and getting outside support to help pick you up when you're in that valley, or get non-biased opinions from other people when you're in that valley, will help you decide if your business plan needs to change. Because every time I was in that valley, my business plan needed to be modified. my business plan of like how I worked with people or how I managed people or the type of clients we were going after. All those things were what created that struggle. And so I had to modify the business plan a little bit. And by the way, I don't in my office, you've been in my office. I don't have a posted business plan,
A
but I
vision
do
board.
sit with, no, I mean, I have an idea. I know where I want to go. Like I've got a big idea. I mean, we've been doing it 16 years now. I don't have a posted 1-page plan that we're all following, but like
Yeah.
the deal is that I am very clear about where we go. My partner's very clear about where we need to go. And like, we are both on track to continue to make that happen. And we take everybody with us on that plan. So I just think that those are the 3 areas I think you can decide on where you need to pivot and where you need to change things.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's important because you're talking about like building your business and it's okay to like when you get into those low moments. I know like a lot of people's little voices, we talk a lot about little voices here,
Sure.
and start to feel like, oh man, I'm failing as a person. They start to just crash and burn and be like, I'm a wreck. I failed. I can't do this. I don't know what I'm doing. And they start to just get all in their head. And then it gets worse and worse rather than realizing that we talk a lot about how mistakes are lessons unlearned regret is lessons unlearned, and mistakes help you grow faster and quicker. So when you start to get into those little moments, or say you're in your car right now and you're listening to this and you're like, man, my business is there. Just know this is an opportunity, and no mistake you're listening to this podcast of like, it's okay to ask for help and to seek out people who can come inside and support you, who know more. They maybe have had experience different ways. Like we all have experience that we can offer each other. And so seek out those people who can support you and give you the advice to help past. I was just talking with one of our clients the other day, and she was saying like before she joined the academy, for years she had reached her point. She never could reach over a certain number. And then she joined, and it was just a different type of advice and a different direction for her to go. And now she's far surpassed that in the first year of being in the academy. So that's the thing, is find people who can take you past what you know.
Yeah, you said something too about finding people who know something you don't. I think there's another thing too in that same vein, Kayla, is that you got to find people who are not emotionally attached to your situation. You know, I did a daily boost on this just the other day. I'm sure it'll come out at some point, but it was perspective versus perception. And it's this idea that like we all evaluate life through our own perspective, and the best people can actually have a perception not only of their own perception but of somebody else's perception. And so one of the most powerful things about the academy is it gives you the opportunity to reflect back under multiple points of perception. So like if you just take an example here, I'll have to take my AirPod case here, but like, here's my AirPod case. It's one point of perception. I'll take the screwdriver. These are the things I have on my desk.
I was like,
but like, these are the most random things, but like, here's this one perspective. And it says like, you can only do so much. There's only so many people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But like, if here's Kayla, and then here's Jason, and then here's Caitlin, and then here's Kayleen, and here's all the other people that are looking at it, instead of just seeing it from your perspective out where you can only see one way, you now have all these other different points of perception. So inside the academy, what if all of a sudden you now have even just 5 or 6 different other people's perceptions of where you're at, and they shed some light on things, and you're like, oh, I might be looking at this wrong. But in our academy, it's literally hundreds of other people that if you just talk to them, they'll give you some perspective. And so like, for example, I'll give you a really simple example of this. Perspective versus perception. Somebody's perspective was 15% RTS or 20% RTS was a lot. But as you know, inside our academy, we have people who are doing 30, 40, 45% RTS, in some cases 50 or 60% RTS. So all of a sudden they hear that perspective from somebody else. They're like, that's a lie. You must be doing da-da-da. And like, they fight it. And we all go through that, right? We initially fight it, and then we like maybe believe it a little bit. So they started learning about it, and they're like, wait a second, they're not actually lying. That's a real thing. And now, because that other person has that different perspective, it changes that one person's perception of where they were. And all of a sudden, whoosh, their results change because they see somebody else's perspective on their perception of what's going on. And now they can change their own perception, because the hardest thing you can do is change your perception of reality. That's the hardest thing to do. Our life depends on our perception of reality. So not to get all philosophical in this conversation today, but if you want to change your perception, you've got to be around other people who have different perspective. And so Doug and I are not the end all be all of everybody's perspective. It always kills me when people are like, well, Jason, how many salons have you owned? And I'm like, none. They're like, how can you possibly coach? And I'm like, because my gift is to be able to take everybody else's perspective and turn that into a different viewpoint on your business. And because I haven't owned a salon, I actually hold a very unique perspective on your business because it's not like yours. And that's why our coaching is totally different than every other company. Because if anybody's like, well, I've owned a salon, that's why I can coach you. I'm like, well, That's helpful for sure. That's why Doug exists. Like Doug is the salon owner who's owned several salons and he's super knowledgeable and he'll coach his face off. But that's only one perspective. So if we can give a whole bunch of other perspectives and change people's perception, dude, that's why people have that, because there's proof in the results of hundreds of other people. You can't help but be around 100 other people that are doing things different than you and not change to what's more successful. You can't do it. You will spit out of the system before you lose, you know?
Completely. And I think another thing that, and as you were saying that, it's people be like, oh, well, they're just better at this than me. They just know something that I don't.
Well, they might know something that you don't.
True.
And what they know, they might know something that you don't. And it's normally their thought process and their pattern and it's usually they have a belief that you don't have. They have a belief that they can find staff and you're still believing that you can't. So what can I do to change your belief? Put you around people that believe something different.
Absolutely.
Just change your environment, get around the right people. And you know if you're not in the right environment. You know if everybody around you just placates you and says, oh, poor you, they're so hard to do business and da-da-da-da, versus like you should be around people that are like, hey, you got this. I got your back. I'll help you. Call me anytime. I've got your back. Dude, that's what you want. You want a rabid team of people that have your back no matter what. And that's what I love about the Academy is everybody in there frickin's got each other's back. Even with your brand new, you could join the Academy tomorrow and people are like, don't worry, Kayla, I got your back. And people are like, I don't even know you. They're like, don't worry. I've been where you are before. I know it's going to take a minute to believe me, but you will. And then people fall in love with what we do.
And it's not a competition. So long story short, in this whole podcast, Business Plan 101 is find yourself a community of people who will support you and love on you and teach you what they know. It's not a competition.
I would say that's part of the business plan. That's part of it, right? Is like, business plan is like put a pro forma together and start operating on your plan, start projecting forward. The other thing is support yourself with people around you that will look at your business plan and lift it up.
Absolutely. Nice. Well, thank you so much, Jason. This has been a lot of fun. I feel like I'm ready I'm going to go start my own business now. But thank you for hanging out. It's been a lot of fun. If you got a lot of value out of this, say value. If you're listening in your car, just yell value. I'll hear it somewhere. Value. But we always love when you hang out with us. So hopefully you found a lot of value out of today, and we'll see you next time on the Profitable Salon Owner Podcast. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Kayla. Appreciate it. You've been listening to the Profitable Salon Owner Podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave us a review, and check us out at profitablesalon.com for more episodes, content, and to help you turn your salon into the business you've always dreamt of.